The sun was high and merciless over Calico County the day Maribel vanished. It was July 11th, 1987, the second day of the annual Calico County Fair. The kind of fair where the air smelled like popcorn, grease, and animal feed, and every third person was somebody's cousin. Maribel Cortez, just 10 years old, stood beside her prized goat Willow in the youth livestock ring, nervously brushing down its white fur with trembling fingers. She wore a pressed blue cotton dress with a ribbon in her hair and scuffed brown boots that she refused to replace. People say the fair was the biggest thing that ever happened in Calico, bigger than any Sunday sermon or mayoral speech. Families drove in from counties over just to walk past the quilt tents and ride the rusted Ferris wheel that tilted a little too far to the left when the wind picked up. For the Cortez family, it was tradition. Every year they brought something: baked pies, canned peaches, sometimes a hand-sewn dress. That year they brought Maribel and Willow. By noon, Maribel had won third place in her age group for goat handling. Her mother kissed her forehead. Her father clapped her back with pride. Her sister Claire snapped a picture of her holding the ribbon, standing barefoot in the dust next to Willow. And then Maribel, still buzzing with joy, asked for permission to get lemonade. "She'll be right back," her mother had said with a tired smile, handing her a crumpled dollar. "She always comes back." She didn't. The Cortez family searched for hours. At first it was calm, calling her name near the lemonade stand, checking behind the food stalls and under the bleachers. But as the sun began to sink and the sky turned amber, panic took hold. By dusk, the fairgrounds were in chaos. Searchlights swung over hay bales and ride queues. Sheriff's deputies taped off the petting zoo. Loudspeakers echoed Maribel's name long after the music had stopped. And then there was Willow, still tied to a wooden post near the lemonade stand, calmly chewing grass, as if waiting. The same spot where Maribel was last seen. No scream, no witnesses, just gone. The fair shut down the next day. For the first time in county history, they canceled the closing fireworks. The lemonade stand vendor, a college kid from out of town, claimed he never saw her. Nobody saw her. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some blamed fair staff. Some whispered about drifters hiding near the livestock pens. Others pointed fingers at the Ferris wheel operator who left town the morning after. But there was no proof, no camera footage, no blood, no body. Just a 10-year-old girl who stepped away for a drink and never came back. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Volunteers combed the woods behind the fairgrounds. Divers checked the shallow creek half a mile down. Flyers were stapled to every telephone pole, tacked up in grocery stores and post offices. Her photograph, big brown eyes, loose braid, sunburnt cheeks, stared blankly back at a town that didn't have answers. Willow the goat was brought back home. She stopped bleeding, refused to eat for nearly 4 days. Maribel's mother said she just stood at the edge of the fence, watching the gravel road like she expected her girl to return. Sometimes in the middle of the night, they'd hear the goat pacing near the gate, waiting, listening. The Cortez family never really recovered. The father Miguel grew quiet, drank more. The mother Elena stopped attending church. Claire, 16 at the time, left town for college the next year, but she carried the weight like a stone in her chest. Maribel's room was never changed. Her ribbons stayed on the wall. Her muddy boots remained at the door. There were no anniversaries, no birthday cakes, only silence. The fair came back the next summer, but something had changed. The lemonade stand never returned. The livestock competition was smaller. Parents kept their children close, and no one used the far end of the fairgrounds anymore. The dry patch of earth near the old wooden fence where Willow had stood, watching. Maribel's case was added to the state's unsolved file. No leads, no suspects, no hope. Just a date, July 11th, 1987, and a hole in the town's memory that never quite closed. How does a child disappear in broad daylight with hundreds of people around? Some say she was taken. Others believe she ran away. But those who knew her, especially Claire, knew better. Maribel had been too excited, too proud of Willow, too full of life. She would never have left without her goat. Claire remembered that morning like it was seared into her skull. The smell of hay, the hum of generators, the way Maribel's laugh echoed under the bleachers. She remembered braiding her little sister's hair on the porch before they left the house. She remembered Maribel saying, "Don't let Willow eat my ribbon again." But Claire couldn't remember saying goodbye, and that, more than anything else, is what haunted her. Claire Cortez had long since stopped walking the back pasture. Ever since Maribel disappeared, she avoided it. That edge of the farm where the wooden fence curled along the gravel road, where Willow used to stand for hours like a sentry, waiting for someone who never returned. It had become a quiet, forbidden corner. Even now at 28, Claire didn't go there unless she had to. Too many ghosts in that soil. Too many mornings when she looked out the kitchen window and seen that little goat pacing the fence line like it knew something no one else did. In the 11 years since her sister vanished, Claire had built a version of herself that could survive. She stayed in Calico County, unlike most girls her age, got a job at the library, kept her routines small, cleaned the same shelves, labeled the same books, lived in the same house where her sister's room stayed locked. Everyone else seemed to move on. People stopped bringing up Maribel at church. The sheriff retired. The fair returned every summer, though slightly quieter, slightly dimmer. But Claire had become something hollow and permanent, a scar the town walked around but never asked about. Every year on July 11th, she drove past the fairgrounds without stopping. She told herself she didn't blame anyone. Not the fair organizers, not the cops, not even the boy at the lemonade stand who swore he hadn't seen a thing. But deep down, Claire blamed herself. She was 16 back then. She should have gone with her sister. She should have kept watching. She should have known. But she hadn't. And so, for over a decade, she buried the memory beneath routine. The smell of old paper, the rustle of catalog cards, the hum of the overhead fans at the library. She dated once or twice. Nothing serious. Nobody ever made it past the porch. Until that Monday morning in July 1998, when she received the phone call that unstitched everything. It was just after 6 a.m. She was making coffee. The landline rang, sharp and hollow in the quiet kitchen. She almost didn't answer. "Claire," came the voice. "It's Deputy Halstead. You remember me?" She did. He'd been new in '87, just 22 at the time, fumbling with his radio during the first hours of the search. Now his voice was older, rougher. "There's something I think you need to see," he said. "It's about Willow." Claire froze, the mug in her hand halfway to the counter. "What about her?" "She's back." The words didn't register at first. "She's been gone almost a year, right?" he continued. "Your dad said she wandered off last fall. No sign. But this morning, one of the fairground workers, they're setting up early this week, well, they found her." "Where?" Near the lemonade stand." Claire's knees buckled slightly. She sat without realizing she'd done it. "That can't be," she said. "That's not... You're sure it's her?" She still had the collar tag. Willow Cortez. Same goat, same markings. Calm as anything. Just standing there like she was waiting. Claire didn't respond. Her mouth had gone dry. "We haven't moved her," Halstead said softly. "Didn't want to scare her. We thought, maybe you'd want to come see for yourself." Claire drove to the fairgrounds 20 minutes later, gravel crunching under her tires as the morning fog clung low to the grass. The parking field was still empty except for 2 trucks and a trailer. Folding tents stood half-raised like skeletons. No rides yet, just silence. And then she saw her, Willow, standing in the exact spot where they'd found her 11 years ago. Older now, of course. A little thinner, one ear slightly nicked. But it was her. Claire recognized the tuft of fur behind her right horn. The way she shifted her weight from one leg to another. She hadn't changed. Not really. Claire approached slowly, heart pounding in her ears. Willow looked up and made a soft bleating sound, a sound Claire hadn't heard in over a decade. She reached out, hesitated, then knelt. Her hand trembled as she brushed it along the goat's neck. The worn leather collar was still there, barely intact. The metal tag was dull but readable. Willow Cortez. She was real, and she had come back. Claire looked around. The field was quiet. The lemonade stand platform had long since been dismantled, but the gravel patch remained. Faded, forgotten. Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. "How?" she whispered. "Why now?" The goat didn't answer, of course, but her presence spoke louder than any words. 11 years gone, and she'd returned to the very place where everything had fallen apart. Claire stood in that field for a long time. She didn't notice the breeze picking up or the way her hands clenched unconsciously. She was remembering every scream, every silence, every sleepless night that had followed. And something inside her, something long buried, shifted. Maybe it was time. Maybe it wasn't just a coincidence. Maybe the goat had come back to lead her somewhere. Claire didn't sleep that night. After leaving the fairgrounds, she brought Willow back to the farm. The goat walked beside her without resistance, like she knew the way home. No leash, no panic, just quiet recognition, like time hadn't passed at all. Like 11 years of emptiness had been nothing more than a long, winding detour. Her father came out to the porch when he heard the screen door creak. He stood there gray-haired and sunburned, eyes heavy with years. When he saw Willow, he didn't say a word, just sank onto the steps and rubbed his temples. "She came back," Claire whispered. He nodded. "That animal should be dead by now." "I know." Willow settled near the barn, curling into the dirt like she used to. Claire sat across from her on the ground, knees drawn up, watching the way the goat's chest rose and fell with each steady breath. It made no sense. None. And yet it felt inevitable. Like a chapter that had always been waiting to be read. By morning, Claire had made her decision. She called the library and told them she'd be out for a few days. Then she drove back to the fairgrounds. Something had shifted inside her. Not quite hope, not yet, but movement. And movement was more than she'd felt in years. She parked along the edge of the vendor field, now buzzing with trucks and workers setting up folding tents. The Ferris wheel parts were stacked in metal rows, still waiting to be bolted into something meaningful. Somewhere beneath that skeleton of an event, her sister's story had stopped, and now maybe it wanted to be continued. She walked toward the gravel lot where Willow had been standing the day before. It hadn't changed, same patch of dirt, same faint indentation of an old post long removed. Claire crouched and scanned the ground. Dust, leaves, a few bottle caps. Nothing unusual. Then her eye caught something, a dull metallic glint half buried near the edge of the gravel. She reached down, brushed the dirt away, and froze. It was a charm. A small brass heart no larger than a dime, darkened by time but still intact. Etched across the front in a child's scrawling handwriting, "Emmy, Mom." Claire's stomach dropped. She remembered it instantly. Maribel had made it at a craft booth during the fair 1 year before her disappearance. She'd worn it every day on a string around her wrist. Claire remembered teasing her about it. "It's gonna turn your arm green," she'd laughed. But Maribel refused to take it off. Claire stood up, clutching the charm like it might vanish. This was no accident. Someone had missed this. 11 years, multiple searches, and it had just been. Here. She took a shaky breath and looked around. No one was watching. She dropped the charm into her jacket pocket and walked back to the parking lot in a daze. She didn't go home. She drove instead to the sheriff's station. The building hadn't changed since the 80s. Same green carpet, same dusty flag by the window. Deputy Halstead was still there, older, heavier, but his eyes sharpened when she placed the charm on his desk. "You're sure it's hers?" "She made it, I remember." He picked it up, examined the M, and nodded slowly. This was near where she vanished?" Claire nodded. She had it the day she disappeared. It was on her wrist. Halstead exhaled through his nose. "We went over that area 10 times. You know that." Claire's voice didn't waver. "Then how did it end up buried 2 inches from where Willow stood yesterday?" He didn't answer. Because they both knew what it meant. Someone had returned to that spot. Maybe not recently, but after the original search. Someone had either dropped it there later, or the ground had shifted just enough over the years to reveal what had always been waiting just beneath the surface. "I want to reopen it," Claire said. "The case. I want everything pulled back out. Photos, witnesses, interviews, all of it." Halstead leaned back in his chair. "Claire, I understand. God knows I do. But 11 years is a long time. Most of those folks have moved on. Some are gone. And even if we reopen it—" "She came back," Claire interrupted. "The goat came back. You think that means nothing?" Silence stretched. "I don't know what it means," he finally said. "But I'll look into it, quietly, no promises." Claire nodded. "That's all I ask." That night she lay awake again, staring at the ceiling fan, spinning shadows across her bedroom walls. In her palm she held the charm. The brass was still warm from her skin. She thought about Maribel's voice, the way she used to hum without realizing, the way she'd tug on Willow's ears and whisper secrets to her like the goat was a diary. She'd buried all those memories so deep. Now they were crawling back like roots breaking through pavement. And for the first time since 1987, Claire wasn't afraid to feel them. Claire started with the photo albums. They were buried deep in a cedar chest beneath her mother's bed. wrapped in an old quilt and smelling faintly of lavender and dust. Most hadn't been touched in years. Claire had always avoided them, afraid of what they'd unlock. But now she lifted them carefully onto the kitchen table, where morning light poured through the lace curtains and lit the faded plastic sleeves. She flipped past birthdays, Christmas mornings, muddy boots on back porches. Then, tucked in the back of the 1987 album, she found it. A single photo of Maribel at the fair. Not the posed one Claire had taken before the livestock show, but a candid snapshot someone else had captured. Maribel was walking, mid-step with Willow at her side, moving toward the vendor tents. Her back was turned to the camera, the charm bracelet visible on her left wrist. But what caught Claire's eye wasn't Maribel. It was the man behind her, partially in frame, out of focus. Wearing a yellow staff vest, standing near the edge of the lemonade stand, Claire stared at it for a long time. She didn't recognize him. She showed it to her father that afternoon. He didn't either, nor did the neighbors. She called Deputy Halstead and asked if fair staff records still existed from 1987. "We had a partial list," he said. "Some of the college hires, volunteers, why?" "Because there's someone in this photo," she said, "and I don't think he was ever questioned." He promised to check. Claire hung up and slid the photo into a protective sleeve. She didn't stop there. That evening, she drove to the fair office, a low brick building near the edge of town with a rusted flagpole and a cracked cement eagle perched out front. The manager, a middle-aged woman named Doris Henderson, met her at the door. Claire remembered her vaguely from high school. She used to run the bake-off tent. "I heard about Willow," Doris said. "That's strange. Comforting in a way, I guess, but strange." Claire got to the point. "Do you have any records from the 87 fair? Staff, vendors, old layouts, anything?" Doris frowned. "That's ancient history, but I can check the storage room." They spent 2 hours digging through dented file boxes, many of them unmarked. At the bottom of one labeled Fair Docs 80s, Claire found a brittle map of the fairgrounds from that year. The vendor stalls were labeled in pencil: lemonade, kettle corn, quilting demo, livestock area. She traced her finger across the layout. Maribel had disappeared somewhere between the lemonade stand and the quilting demo tent, a narrow alley between two tents, unmonitored. Easy to miss. Doris peered over her shoulder. "That section always gave me the creeps. Too tight. We opened it up the next year." "You think something happened there?" Claire didn't answer. Not yet. She returned home just before sunset. Her father was sitting on the porch, whittling a piece of wood. He looked up, then down at her hands. "What's that?" "Map of the fairgrounds, 1987. He nodded slowly. "You're going all in on this, huh?" "I have to," she said. "If I don't, nobody will." He looked away. "She was 10 years old, Claire. 10. And you were just a kid yourself." "I'm not a kid anymore." He didn't argue. That night, Claire spread the map across her kitchen table and stared at it for hours. She marked the spot where Willow was tied, then the lemonade stand, then the alley, and finally the patch where she'd found the charm. The path was starting to take shape. The next morning, she drove to a nearby town, where the 1987 fair records claim one of the vendor managers, Earl Lasky, had lived. He was retired now, lived alone in a one-bedroom rental above a fishing supply store. When Claire knocked, he opened the door shirtless, scratching his chest. "I'm not buying anything. I'm not selling." She showed him the photo. "You were the vendor supervisor for the 87 Calico County Fair." He blinked. "Long time ago. Do you remember who worked the lemonade stand?" He squinted at the photo. "Might have been a kid named Troy. Troy Benson. College hire. Always wore headphones. Real jumpy." "Why?" Claire hesitated. "He was one of the last people near my sister before she disappeared." Earl rubbed his jaw. "Don't remember much about him. Think he was from upstate. Only worked 1 year. Do you have any contact info?" Earl shook his head. "If the fair office don't got it, it's long gone." Claire nodded, trying not to show her disappointment. But she had a name now. Troy Benson, and she had a map, and a charm, and a goat that had returned without explanation. The trail was faint, but it was there. That night, she sat in Maribel's old room for the first time in years. The air smelled like paper and sun-dried linen. Everything was exactly as it had been. Toys arranged neatly, ribbons pinned to corkboard, the bed made untouched. On the desk sat Maribel's sketchbook. Claire ran her fingers along the spine, then opened it gently. Page after page of childish drawings, most of Willow. One stood out. The lemonade stand, drawn in green crayon, with a tiny figure standing behind it. But the figure wasn't smiling. It had no face at all. Claire closed the book and stared out the window. This wasn't over. Not yet. The name Troy Benson led nowhere. Claire spent 2 days calling every college in the state that might have hired summer workers in 1987. Most had no records going back that far. A few secretaries laughed awkwardly. One offered to check microfilm but never called back. It was like the guy had vanished into thin air the moment the fair ended. Claire wasn't surprised. People disappeared all the time, some on purpose, some quietly, with no one noticing. Others, like her sister, were taken. The difference was, nobody ever went looking for the ones who left behind silence instead of noise. That Friday, she returned to the Fairgrounds again. The rides were up now. Music floated faintly from the speakers hung along the main path. Kids were already running past popcorn stalls, and the Ferris wheel creaked rhythmically in the distance. The fair wouldn't officially open until the next day, but the energy had begun to build. Claire kept her distance from the crowds. She walked the perimeter instead, tracing the same route she'd mapped out in her kitchen. Lemonade stand, quilting tent, the narrow alley that no longer existed, now widened into a food truck lane. It was near that edge where she saw someone watching her. He was older, maybe late 60s, standing beside a vendor trailer, holding a clipboard he didn't look at. His eyes were on her, not curious, not friendly, just still. His mouth a thin line. Claire turned to face him. He looked away instantly and disappeared behind the tent. She hesitated, walked slowly toward where he'd been. But by the time she rounded the corner, he was gone. She didn't know what unsettled her more, the man himself, or the feeling that he recognized her. That evening, she called Deputy Halstead again. "There's something I need you to pull," she said. "Employee photos. 1987. Anything with faces." "Claire, we barely have names, let alone photos." "Check the county fair archive or yearbooks, local newspapers. Somebody has something." He sighed, then agreed to look. The next day, Claire went back to the library. Not to work, but to dig. She searched Old Town bulletins, archived editions of the Calico County Chronicle. It was there in a July 1987 article about the fair's opening day that she found a group photo of the vendor staff standing in front of the prize tent. Her hands shook as she scanned their faces. Bottom row, far left. The man from yesterday, younger obviously, shorter hair, but same mouth, same narrowed eyes. She checked the caption. Fair vendor team, July 10th, 1987. Front row, L. Davis, T. Benson, K. Reese. Her finger stopped. T. Benson. Troy. She grabbed a photocopy of the page and ran back to her car. At home, she stared at it beside Maribel's photo. It wasn't just a face anymore. It was a link. She picked up the phone and dialed Halstead again. "I found him," she said, "in the paper." "You sure?"
Yes.
He was quiet for a second. "I did some digging, too. There's something else you should know." Claire waited. "Remember Harold Kemp? He ran the prize booth back then. Retired right after the 87 fair." Yeah, what about him?" "He was reported missing 2 months later. His truck was found abandoned near a bus stop in Memphis. Never located." Claire's stomach dropped. "You're saying 2 people went missing after that fair?" Halstead exhaled. "I'm saying we never looked at it that way before. Everyone focused on Maribel. We never connected the dots. Maybe we should have." Claire stared at the wall. "Is there any record of him and Troy knowing each other?" "Not that I've found. But if they worked the same tent, there's a good chance they did." "Why didn't anyone see this before?" "Because no one wanted to." The line went quiet again. Then Halstead added, "Be careful, Claire. You're stirring things." "I think someone already knows that," she said softly. That night, she heard footsteps outside the house. Just after midnight, soft, slow, deliberate. She turned off the lamp and stood at the window. The porch was empty, but the gate to the pasture was swinging open, creaking in the wind. Willow was awake, standing in the dark, facing the fence line. Claire stepped onto the porch, heart pounding. She called out, no response. Only the night birds, only crickets. She locked the door that night, something she hadn't done in years. The next morning, she found fresh boot prints in the dirt leading away from the pasture. Too large to be hers, too deep to be old. Someone had been watching. Someone had gotten closer than she thought. Claire stopped sleeping. Not just tossing and turning, she stopped altogether. Each night bled into morning, and each morning into another dull gray afternoon. When she did manage to close her eyes, she dreamt in fragments. A flash of Maribel's blue ribbon caught in the wind, the echo of a bleat across an empty field, her sister's voice calling her name, but always from far away, too far to reach. The sound of the goat bell haunted her worst. She hadn't even realized Willow still wore one until she heard it again. Soft, metallic, muffled, like something warning her gently. You're getting close, but not close enough. She sat in the living room with the photo and the charm laid out like relics of a life she'd never finished living. 11 years of silence, now unraveling in a matter of days. And somewhere deep inside, something cracked. She began replaying that day at the fair over and over, trying to spot the moment she failed. It always started the same. Maribel skipping ahead in her boots, swinging the crumpled dollar in her hand. Claire lagging behind, distracted by a boy she liked who was setting up his guitar for the talent tent. A few seconds, that's all it took. Maribel turned the corner, and that was it. Gone. Claire buried her face in her hands. She had looked away, just once, and the universe had devoured her sister whole. She thought about the things people had said afterward. Some kind, most not. You weren't her mother. She wandered off. Kids run. Maybe she wanted to disappear. They said those things because they needed to, because it was easier to believe a child chose to vanish than admit something terrible had taken her while her sister stood just yards away. Claire had believed them too, or at least pretended to, but that lie had festered in her bones, that she had failed, that it was her fault. Now each new clue stabbed into that wound. She began to see Maribel everywhere. At the grocery store, a girl with the same haircut turned down the cereal aisle, and Claire nearly dropped her basket. At the library, a child's laugh outside the window made her choke on her coffee. At night, her voice whispered in the wind, riding in on the rustle of willow trees behind the house. Sometimes she heard her in the walls. Claire kept the bedroom door open now, Maribel's room. She didn't touch anything, but she left the light on. And sometimes, just before dawn, she swore she saw movement, a flicker of shadow near the desk or the edge of the bed. She told no one, not even her father, who had started keeping a shotgun on the porch again. Not even Halstead, who checked in twice but didn't mention the boot prints or the man from the photo. Everyone around her still wanted the story to stay buried. But Claire was past the point of pretending. She drove to the Fairgrounds again that Sunday, alone just before sunset. The crowds had thinned. The music had quieted. The light was gold and flickering. She found herself back at the edge of the vendor lane, where the quilting tent used to be. She stood there a long time. Then, without really knowing why, she closed her eyes.
And there it was.
That memory, one she hadn't let herself remember in over a decade. Maribel, just after the goat show, tugging at Claire's sleeve. Can I go get lemonade now? Claire had waved her off. Yeah, go ahead. But Maribel had hesitated. Will you come with me? Claire had looked toward the stage, where the boy with the guitar was warming up. He'd been waiting for her. You'll be fine, she'd said. You've done it before. Maribel had nodded quietly and walked away. That was the last thing she ever said to her sister. And it hadn't been enough. Claire opened her eyes. She was shaking. The grass shimmered in the heat, and a slow panic rose in her chest. Not just grief, not just guilt. Something else. The sense that whatever had taken Maribel hadn't left. That it was still here, watching, waiting. She drove home in silence, parked the truck, stumbled into the house. She was halfway to the kitchen when she noticed something on the front step. A photo, face down. She picked it up with trembling hands. It was her, Claire, from earlier that day, standing alone near the vendor lane, caught mid-step, unaware she was being watched. Written on the back in neat, childlike handwriting, "Getting closer." Her vision blurred. She dropped the photo and backed into the wall. Outside, the goat bell rang once. Then silence. They found her beneath the vendor lane. 3 days after Claire received the photo, Deputy Halstead brought a forensic team to the fairgrounds. Claire had handed him the image without saying a word. She didn't need to. The handwriting on the back, the angle, the implication. It was a threat wrapped in a clue. Ground-penetrating radar swept the old gravel path where the quilting tent once stood. 2 feet beneath the surface, they found a hollow, a shift in the soil, human-shaped. It took 6 hours to dig her out. The remains were partial. Time and earth had done their work, but they were enough. Enough for dental records, enough for the locket still clutched in the tiny hand. Enough for Claire to stand back, hands clenched, as the evidence bags were sealed and labeled. She didn't cry. Not then. They never found Troy Benson. The name was real. The photo proved it. But the man was long gone. No address, no trace. The fair's records had never been complete. The town accepted that, like they'd accepted so many other things. But Claire didn't need a name anymore. She had her sister, buried not 100 feet from where Willow had stood that day in 1987, from where Claire had waved her off without walking beside her. She'd been there all along. And somehow Willow, the goat no one believed had memory or reason, had come back to stand on her grave, to bring her home. They held a private memorial behind the house. No church, no procession, just a wooden bench placed near the edge of the pasture, beneath the willow tree where Maribel used to sit with Willow and sing softly to herself. Claire laid a wreath of wildflowers on the new gravestone, a simple gray marker etched with her sister's name, birth date, and the words, "She never wandered, she was taken." Her father spoke only once during the short ceremony, just a whisper, "I'm sorry, baby girl." Then he placed a ribbon beside the stone, one of Maribel's old goat show awards, frayed at the edge but still bright with memory. Willow stayed nearby through it all. She no longer paced, no longer cried at the fence. She simply stood under the tree, quiet and still, as if her task had been completed. In the days that followed, Claire began to breathe again, slowly, unevenly, but with purpose. The house felt lighter, the silence less cruel. She returned to the fairgrounds once, alone, before the booths were taken down. Walked the full path, from where the lemonade stand once stood, through the vendor lane, and to the spot where her sister had been hidden. She didn't stop. At the exit gate, she turned back and whispered, "I found you." And for the first time in 11 years, the wind didn't carry Maribel's name. It carried peace. That night, Claire sat on the porch with Willow resting beside her feet. The stars were clear. The air was still. She closed her eyes, and in the quiet she heard it. A child's laugh.
Faint.
Joyful. Far, far away, but no longer lost.